We have one final keynote left, and she is definitely uh, last but not least, and that is Peggy McLaughlin. Peggy is a strategic, clinical, and regulatory advisor with over 30 years of experience in the medtech industry. She brings a really unique passion for guiding early stage companies, and her career began in sales. That career, though, helped her lay a very strong foundation for deep understanding of both the physician's needs and the patient's needs. And she leverages that knowledge now to support the startups navigating complex clinical and regulatory landscapes. And I know that they benefit greatly for her insights. Throughout her career, Peggy's had diverse roles, like many of our speakers today, across multiple companies, managing clinical trials and authoring regulatory submissions that have led to product clearances in a wide range of clinical areas, including software as a medical device. She's got a particular expertise in first in human studies and also de novo petition submissions for novel technologies, making her especially well suited to both support clinical and regulatory efforts. So my fun fact for Peggy, because you notice I have to have a fun fact for everybody, Peggy actually knew that she wanted what she wanted to do when she was in the third grade. She had a love for science already by the third grade and knew that that was going to be her future. So hats off to Peggy for knowing early. Now let's see what we did with it. We'll take it from there, Peggy.
So I'm going to kind of bring it back and follow the same sort of path that Dom did in terms of telling you about how I got to my career and different things that I have done. Okay, how did I get here? So I decided in the third grade, as Ingrid said, I was interested in science. And it actually was due to a reading of an Edgar Allan Poe book. But it just really intrigued me. And I thought I wanted to be a doctor. I decided I would go to UCLA and I would be a biology major with, 6,000 other wannabe doctors. And as I got through my tenure at college, I kind of felt like, how long do I want to be in school? I wanted to get to work. I did not want to have another 8+ years of school ahead of me. So I had sort of an epiphany about what do I want to do? And I ended up going into a startup environment, into the startup space. And it was really a fortuitous first job. It was off the college career center bulletin board. It was a small company that was doing chemosensitivity testing, and I was hired to be a salesperson. The company was led by a serial entrepreneur who had developed several other companies. I was interested in it because I was able to use my science background to go and tell people, clinicians, doctors, about this test. And so I, became a salesperson. I took a class in sales, several classes in sales and how to optimize my selling, and got into marketing. How do we better market this product, et cetera. And along the way, I was there for a few years and kind of thought, okay, I've done this for a while. I'm ready for something new. But no, that serial entrepreneur was starting another company. And he asked me to join him at the next company. So I took that sales and marketing to the next venture and worked for a company that became very large and was acquired by Boston Scientific. And I created marketing materials. I hired client services folks. I hired a sales team. I was able to select and train international distributors and did a lot of international travel. I was able to take that job because the serial entrepreneur could see that I was a hard worker. I was committed. I was a can-do person. I, do anything to keep moving forward with work. And so, before I did all these big things, I did everything from sort the mail to feed the laboratory animals. You just pitched in where things needed to get done. There was no ego around anything. You just did it. And through that, you create the relationships that sustain your career. And that's kind of something that I'm going to keep coming back to as an important aspect in my career success. So then I went from there to sales and marketing for an independent clinical testing laboratory. And I was managing the book of tests that they offered, which was over 2,000 different tests, coordinating the drivers who did the pickup of the specimens, and that was their sales team, creating marketing materials, etc. But I learned, or I came to the realization that, okay, I'm ready to step down from full-time work for some family time after I had my second child. And I think I made that decision in November, and by January, I was ready to take on some projects on a consulting basis, because I really loved work, as Leslie and Dom both said. It would make, I jump out of bed ready for work every day. So I started with some part-time consulting work for the folks I had met along the way. They remembered me from my commitment to work and can-do spirit, and would just call and say, hey, do you think you could do this? And this being sometimes more marketing based, sometimes more sales based. But let me go back to that second serial entrepreneur position. I also got into to be doing some preclinical and clinical work. And that kind of work turned out to be sort of the easiest work to segregate that I could do in sort of chunks of time, as opposed to being a salesperson out on the road all the time. I could work on a clinical study and manage that in a way that I could also manage my family time. So I did marketing, I did training, I did clinical research. And again, all from word of mouth with folks that I had met along the way. When my kids were a little bit older, I had a third child, and when she was about 10, I decided, gee, I'm ready to go back to work full time. And maybe I should work for a really big company, because I hadn't done that before. And so I went to work for Abbott Vascular Devices, and I was leading a $25 million clinical study for a drug-eluting stent. But I found that that work was very siloed. It was very much, Peggy, you're doing clinical research, don't talk to regulatory, don't talk to engineering, don't talk to marketing. And that wasn't the kind of work that I wanted to do. So I got a call from a former colleague who was now leading another startup company. And I went back to that work, which is where I met Dom. And Dom and I worked at a company called Sierra, where we were bringing a new technology to market in the cardiology space. And it was another small company where I got to contribute in lots of areas. Again, working like crazy, building a team. I had to learn how to manage a wayward employee I had. I had to build a system to provide our clinical results presented weekly in a way that we could see, how well are we doing this week? What if we look at it from this perspective versus that perspective? Should we change the way we're delivering our therapy, et cetera? We did that for a number of years, and then we had to weather a confluence of outcomes that led to the company closure. We were on the brink of success, but funding was a tricky thing at that time. And so that company closed. And after that, I did continuing work for that company as we wrapped up clinical studies, et cetera, and started again consulting with entities, folks that I had known before who asked me to come work on this or that. But then I decided to take a position with one of the startups that I had worked with, because it had the most impressive venture capital backing from Kleiner Perkins. And it was a really vetted, well-vetted startup company. One of my lessons there was that you have to consider both the vetting by others and the team you'll be working with, because the CEO that I was working with as kind of the number 2 person at the company was a super smart gentleman, but was just not a good personal match. So I left that company after a few years and decided, after kind of working a lot, that I needed to go back to consulting, but because I was kind of exhausted from that full-time work. And so I've been doing that for almost 15 years now. That is consulting with a number of different companies, which I've loved, because I've been able to work in a lot of different areas. I'm kind of bringing up pictures of some of the types of products that I've worked on over the years. And one of the things that I like very much about consulting is that I get to work on a lot of different products and bring them to market in a way that if I worked for one company, I'd probably be working for 3 years on one product and only one product. And I've worked on a number of products over the years, both in doing clinical studies and regulatory processes to bring these products to market. So it's been, just very, very rewarding and given me an opportunity to continue to expand my knowledge and my clinical knowledge also. I wanted to just mention a little bit more about regulatory and clinical, and those are the areas that I work in, and I know, chatting with a couple of the mentees over our break periods that not everybody is in the med tech space, but regulatory is the process of working with the FDA to notified bodies, those are the regulatory entities outside the United States, to bring a product to market, meeting all the rules and requirements. And so I wanted to touch on, who goes into regulatory, and it's often folks who come from an R&D space or quality space, because they know, the product development areas, or regulatory consulting firms. They're firms that only focus on the regulatory processes. And then traits for success for regulatory folks are that you need to be very detail-oriented, very organized, very logical. And I think most importantly, you need to have exceptional writing and storytelling skills, because it's all about communication, collaboration, and negotiation. So when you're talking to a regulatory agency, you are the storyteller about your product, and you need to be able to explain it soup to nuts and bring them along with you on the journey so they understand the product as well as you understand it, and they understand all the testing you've done, all the risks associated with the product, all the potential benefits of the product, and that they can get comfortable with, yes, this is a safe and effective product and appropriate to authorize commercialization. You also need to be a little bit of a puzzle solver, putting together all of these pieces in terms of testing and regulatory pathways and rules and requirements, et cetera. And over time, you would grow as a regulatory person from checking the boxes that are required, just knowing, oh, I have to do this testing, good, that testing is done, to strategizing about the kind of testing you might need to do for this product or the product you have in years down the road. And you want to be able to anticipate the FDA needs and navigate towards what would be the least burdensome approach. They might have a lot of requirements, but perhaps you could consolidate those requirements by doing one test that addresses a number of areas, that kind of thing. Why regulatory can be an awesome career? You get to be exposed to and work with all facets of the business. So this is where Dom and I, we'd sit in a room every week and we'd hash things out from R&D to regulatory to clinical to quality, all the pieces that go together to bring a product to market. The regulatory path is strategically important for the success of the product and how your product can be marketed. You play a key role in the product development team, and it requires both strategic and long-term thinking. And you work with the FDA, who regulates 25% of consumer spending. So that's a huge chunk of our global economy. And best of all, it's all directed at an effort to develop a product that could provide treatments for millions of patients. That's what keeps Leslie and Dom and those of us in the med tech space working. Clinical, on the other hand, has slightly different entry paths. The majority of clinical folks are often ex-nurses or clinician folks in the clinical area, like physician assistants, et cetera. They may come from an engineering background, and then there's clinical research consulting firms that also provide personnel in this area. Traits for success include that detail-oriented, organized, and logical skills, good writing skills, more and more importantly, data savvy, understanding how to collect your data, analyze it, what to do with that information, And very exciting, as Leslie said, how to incorporate AI into that process. Communication and collaboration is important, and salesmanship, because you are building relationships with entities that are going to be the clients for your product. So you want to be able to sell them on why they would want to be in your clinical study, but also down the road, theoretically, they'd want to buy your product. And again, same, directed to developing a product that could provide a treatment for millions of patients. And then I'm a big quote person too, and this is my favorite quote, is that the best prize that life offers is the chance to work hard at work worth doing. And that's the kind of thing that keeps me going every day and makes me jump out of bed, because what I'm doing matters, and I get to contribute to the health of many people and in lots of areas. So thanks for having me, Ingrid, and I look forward to chatting with our mentees again.